Hello again, it's Pastor Otua, and I want to welcome you to day 6 of the Daily Walk. I'm really excited for this passage we have for today, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Our passage for today is Philippians chapter 1, verses 20 to 26. If you feel comfortable, you can pause the video and say a short prayer that you would receive whatever it is that God might be saying to you. So the part we're studying for today comes right after Paul has said he expects himself to be delivered from his current imprisonment. And it's easy to assume that he means this literally like freed. But after reading this section, you have to kind of wonder if maybe he meant this more spiritually. Because if you read through this passage a couple times, it's almost like he isn't quite sure whether or not he will actually survive his sentence. I mean, he starts off by saying what he ultimately expects or hopes is that he would have courage. He doesn't want to be ashamed. Why? So that Christ will be exalted in his body. And that's whether he lives or if he dies. That's his expectation, that's his hope. And I notice from here that a theme begins of life versus death. I mean, first we see here, of course, death, to die. And he talks about how that is gain. And he mentions in verse 23 also that it's him being with Christ. That's what it means to die or depart. And he actually says that he wants it more than life, which is crazy to think about. But he mentions how for him it's the better of the two, right? It's far better, he says, for him. And life to live is also Christ, but it means labor as well. And while he would rather death, he realizes that living is actually more necessary. It's better for the church that he remains. That's the you we see here. And so to summarize, we have death, which means gain. It's better for Paul. And also it's being in the presence of Christ, being with Christ. And then we have life, which means labor, means work. It's being with Christ in a different way. It's better for them. And it's the latter, it's life that Paul thinks will happen. He's convinced, he mentions, that he will remain, he will keep on living for their progress of joy in the faith. And so this is actually one of the most popular passages in all of the Bible. We talked about how Paul is in prison awaiting his sentence, and in some sense he seems confident that he will be okay. But there also seems to be almost this internal battle about what he thinks the outcome of his imprisonment will be, but also what he prefers to happen. On one hand, he knows because of his faith that if he dies, he'll be in the presence of Jesus. On the other hand, he knows if he stays, he'll be in the presence of the church, both in Philippi and the rest of the world. Ultimately, it's the latter that he thinks should happen, that he should survive his sentence, stay in the world, so that he could encourage, support, and help grow the young churches in Christ. What I love about this passage is how he describes the work he's called to do here and now. First, that he's not doing it ultimately for himself, but just as Jesus worked and laid down his life for others, Paul thinks his work should be a sacrifice for the progress of others as well. Now, I know for me, it's hard to not only think of myself when it comes to work. If I'm considering switching jobs or the projects I'm working on, it's not natural for me to ask myself, how does my decision affect others? And I don't think Paul was talking about, just vocation, but perhaps that's a good place to start for us as we evaluate our lives. What's encouraging, though, is that Paul insinuates that we have help. Dying isn't the only way to be in the presence of God, because living and working can also be done in for and through Christ. In other words, perhaps He's the one who can empower and transform us to be the kind of people whose life and work is dedicated to those around us. Maybe today you can reflect on the work you do both vocationally and outside your job as well. And you can ask yourself, is it good work? Is it selfless work? Is it the kind of work that's for the sake of other people? Maybe today you can simply take a moment to pray to God that He would be the true vine that produces fruitful labor in your life. I'll see you next time.